Well, hey everyone, great to be back with you for week 4 of our men's study, Everyday People. For those of you who don't know, my name is Perry. I'm the campus pastor on our Mesa campus. So all my Mesa folks, great to be with you. And all of you Gilbert folks watching, it's great to spend some time with you. Got a long history with Gilbert, and it's great to kind of spend some time with you. Wish I could be there. But we're in this series where we're talking about everyday people, and I love how Pastor John started the series, just talking about everyday people in everyday moments, living everyday moments with an everyday God. And that's what we're talking about. These biblical characters that sometimes seem so much larger than life, but when we take them in as everyday people, living their everyday moments, just like we do, because all of us have our everyday moments, but recognizing in all of that, we can bring God into that because God is an everyday God. God is a God who wants to show up. And so that's what we're talking about in going through this. Now, I'm going to share with you one of the things that I love is I love action movies. Like I am the quintessential guy when it comes to action movies. The more explosion and the cheesier the one-liners, the better the movie is. And I love watching them. I've seen many of them. There are a few where I would like to get that time back, but for the most part, I can find something to appreciate about all of those movies. But the thing I love most about action movies is that there's always, when they do them well, there's an origin story, right? Like when you unpack or you kind of dissect an action movie, what you have is this person and they're kind of living their own life, and there's this event, right? This crisis event, this trauma event, this catastrophic event, that's their origin story. And then usually what they're doing is they're trying to come to grips with that, and some big issue comes to them, and reluctantly they step up because they're forced to do it. And it ends up, they have this critical moment where they have a crisis of having to figure out, who am I? And then there's the big finish. And usually they walk away the hero, and that's how it is. Well, I love those moments, or those movies, because I love how we get to see often what's very similar to life. And our character that we're going to look at today is very much like that, in the sense of there's this really powerful origin story, and then there's this crisis moment, which is really what I want to talk about today, is that crisis moment. But we got to start with the origin. So who am I talking about? I'm talking about a guy named Jacob. Now, to understand Jacob, I got to give you some context, and it all begins with Father Abraham, right? We all know who Father Abraham is. Abraham was the guy that God called out to be his representative. And it's interesting that the 3 major monotheistic religions of the world all begin with Abraham. Christians, Muslims, Jews, they all begin with Abraham. Abraham is this guy, right? He's the guy that God calls out. Well, Abraham has many sons. It's not just the song in real life, but there's the one son that is a part of the promise that God gave, and that's Isaac. Abraham and Sarah have Isaac. Isaac is their son. Isaac ends up getting a wife, and then they have kids, and they have 2 kids. And what I want to do is, if you have your Bibles, you can turn to there. We're going to be in Genesis chapter 25 at first, because here's the thing. I got to give some context. Some of these biblical characters that we study, they might have 1 or 2 verses. And then there's someone like Jacob here who has like 25 verses, or chapters, of the book of Genesis. So I've got to pack a lot in to get to the 2 big parts that I want. So let's start at the beginning. Genesis 25, verses 25 to 28, describes a little bit about their birth. It says, the first to come out was red, and his whole body was like a hairy garment, and they named him Esau. How would you like that to be like your birth description? Oh, he's so cute. He's red, hairy, like a garment. That's Esau. He's the first to come out. Verse 26, and then after this, his brother came out with his hand grasping Esau's heel, so he was named Jacob. Now, Isaac was 60 years old, and when Rebekah gave birth to them, and the boys grew up. This is verse 27. The boys grew up, and Esau became a skillful hunter, a man of the open country, while Jacob was content to stay at home among the tents. Isaac, who had a taste for wild game, loved Esau, but Rebekah loved Jacob. Now, we're already starting to see the setup for this origin story, right? We've got these twin boys, and they're battling it out. And Esau comes out first, and that's a very important detail. And it says that Esau was kind of Isaac's kind of a son, man of the outdoors, wild and hairy and stinky and hairy. And then you have Jacob, which we're assuming by the lack of the hairy description was rather, fair and liked to hang out in the tents. probably did some cooking shows with mom and, maybe some sewing tips and things like that. Anyway, but here's the thing. I need to give you a little bit more context because that's their birth story. But before that is really, really important for us to understand about these two people. And it goes like this. It begins in verse 19 of Genesis 25. It says, "This is the account of the family line of Abraham's son Isaac. Abraham became the father of Isaac, and Isaac was 40 years old when he married Rebekah, the daughter of Bethuel, the Aramean from Paddan Aram, and sister of Laban of Aramea." You want to remember that one. "Now Isaac prayed to the Lord on behalf of his wife because she was childless. The Lord answered his prayer, and his wife Rebekah became pregnant." Verse 22, "The babies jostled each other within her, and she said, 'Why is this happening to me?' So she went to inquire of the Lord. The Lord said to her, 'Two nations are in your womb, and two peoples from within you will be separated. One people will be stronger than the other. The older will serve the younger.' When the time came for her to give birth, there were twin boys in her womb." Now notice that she's given this prophetic word from God about the twins that she's carrying, two nations, and that the older will serve the younger. Which is an interesting thing, like, what did she do with that information? Well, we don't know necessarily, but we certainly know she never forgot it. So against all that, let me try to paraphrase the life of Jacob as fast as I can. So you have Jacob and Esau. They have this very contentious relationship. Jacob, actually, his name actually means supplanter. He's a deceiver. He's a conniver. He's this guy who's a manipulator. He's going to try to work things for his own gain. That's a part of his own identity. His name literally means supplanter, which is someone who seizes, circumvents, or usurps things. And so that's Jacob. Well, at some point, Esau makes a very, very foolish decision. He comes in from a hunt. He's starving to death. Literally, that's the language he uses. "I'm starving to death." And he says, "Jacob, give me some of your food. I'm so starving. Give me some food." And Jacob, being, a savvy business guy and, always looking for an opportunity. And I think, too, knowing something, I think mom tipped him off to this prophetic word. But Jacob goes, "Hey, yeah, I'll hook you up with some food. I got something really good going here. I'll tell you what, for the low, low price of your birthright, you can have a bowl of soup." And Esau, being ruled by his stomach in that moment, says, "Whatever, you can have it. Doesn't mean anything to me anyway." Now, you might be going, what's the big deal? In that culture, the firstborn is really automatically going to receive at least 2/3 of the family estate. He's going to receive all of the responsibilities of caring for his mom and for the extended relatives, to leading it all the wealth, all that responsibility. The honor of being the firstborn goes to the firstborn. In this case, would be Esau. And Esau goes, "Yeah, it's not important to me. You can have it for a bowl of soup." Now, I think in Esau's mind, he's like, "Whatever, dude. I'm going to just smack you later anyway and get it. So we can say whatever we want here." But nevertheless, Esau has contempt for his birthright, and Jacob makes a deal for that. So as Isaac's getting older, it comes to a time where Isaac's saying, "It's time for me to give him the blessing. Like, I don't know how many years I got left, and so let's just kind of hand it off now and be ready for that." And so he goes to Esau and says, "Esau, hey, it'd be really good, like, go hunting and make me some of that really good stew that you make. Bring it to me, and I'm going to give you my blessing." And Esau's like, "Oh, this is it. The time's come. What I've been waiting for." And so he goes out. Well, his wife, Rebekah, hears this. And again, Rebekah's got this prophetic word in her head. And I'm sure Jacob had told her about the exchange. Either way, she goes to Jacob and says, "Here's the plan, okay? I'm going to make some stew just like your dad." I'm married to him for a long time. I know exactly how to make it the way he likes it, right? Moms know that. "I'm going to make you some stew. You're going to get some of Esau's clothes. You're going to put them on. We're going to put some goat skin on your hands. You're so hairy that a goat skin confuses. Okay, I'm going to give you some goat skin. You're going to go in and you're going to get your dad's blessing. He can't see. He's as blind as a bat. He can hardly move. And so this is what we're going to do." And so he does exactly that. He goes in. He gets Isaac's blessing. He leaves. Esau comes in after the hunt. The stew's ready. He's all game. And it's like, that. You ever see those camera effects where like they zoom in and move out at the same time? I think it's one of those right now where Isaac's like, "What just happened?" And then Esau's like, Seriously, Daddy? Like, I think he reverts to a 5-year-old. Like, seriously, Daddy, you got no blessing for me? No blessing for me, Daddy. And he doesn't, because Jacob took it. Now, I don't know if any of you have brothers, but when you when you double cross your older brother, you know you're in for a whooping. I'm the youngest of 3 boys, and I got all of it. And I can only imagine Esau comes out and he is screaming bloody murder. He is so mad and so upset, and he threatens to kill Jacob. Now, Rebecca's kind of ready for this, and so Rebecca has this great plan. She goes to Isaac and says, hey, how about we send Jacob back to my family so that he can get a wife from our people? We don't want him to intermarry with all these folks around here. Let's send him back to my family because he needs a wife. He needs a wife. Isaac says, okay. So he sends him back to Aramea, to her brother Laban. Remember Laban from before? That's her brother. He sends him back to Laban. And so Jacob goes to Laban and starts to hang out. And Jacob falls madly in love with Laban's youngest daughter, Rachel. And so he says, I want to marry her. And Laban says, okay, I'll tell you what, for the low price of 7 years of hard labor, you can have her. Now, she must have been smoking hot good for him to say, hey, okay, that's easy. I'll do that in a heartbeat. 7 years of labor. He works for Laban, tending his flocks, growing his wealth, expanding his empire, if you will. He does all that. And at the end of 7 years, it's the wedding day. And so they get married. And okay, I still don't know how this happened. But the next morning he wakes up after spending the evening with this woman he's been waiting for 7 years, and he realizes it's not her. It's Leah, which is Rachel's older sister. Again, I don't know how you're madly in love with somebody and don't figure out it's not her on on your wedding night. But either way, I'm not going to go there. He goes back to Laban and says, what's up with this? And Laban says, hey, it would be inappropriate for me to marry the younger daughter off before the older. So here's the deal. Spend a week with Leah and then give me 7 more years and you can have Rachel at the end of the week and just give me 7 more years. So he gets 2 daughters for 14 years, and I think what's interesting is I think Jacob meets his match as far as the deceiver manipulator, and that's Laban. But Jacob, totally loving Rachel and being a hard worker that he is, says, okay, I'm in. And so he goes after it, and he does another 7 years. But during this time, it's interesting, because during this time, the Lord blesses him. His flocks grow. His family grows. He starts having a lot of kids. He starts expanding his wealth. He has to move a little further away because they're taking up more things. And as his wealth goes, he starts to think, you know what? I don't trust Laban, and something's not right here. And I'm feeling nervous because I don't know what he's going to do, because he's already shown that he's willing to manipulate and deceive and do things. And so it's interesting because we don't really hear a lot about Jacob's relationship with God other than the acknowledgement that it's the God of his grandfather and the God of his father. In fact, he'll say that, the God of my father Abraham, the God of my father Isaac, and he'll pray. And so we have this moment where he prays and about what is he supposed to do? Where should he go? Because Laban's here, that's a threat, but back home is Esau. And he knows what he did with Esau, and that's also in his mind. And so he says he prays in Genesis 31. And it says in verse 3 that the Lord said to Jacob, return to the land of your fathers and to your kindred, and I will be with you. So Jacob gets this word from the Lord and decides to pack up all his stuff. And he tries to sneak off, giving himself some head start before Laban figures out, because he knows what will happen. And sure enough, he gets a couple days out. Laban figures it out, chases him down, and he stands up to Laban, and he says, hey, here's the deal. I've worked for you. I did my time, and then some. You got incredible wealth out of this. I need to go back to my family. And Laban concedes and says, all right, you got to go. And he goes. But now he's in a real quandary, because what he also does is he sends a messenger ahead to Esau to say, hey, brother, we're all good, right? Like, I got all this stuff. I'm not going to take anything from you. I want to come back home. We're good, right? Well, the messenger comes back. and basically says, so I went, and I told Esau, and he said, hey, he's coming out to meet you, and by the way, he's bringing 400 men with him. Again, I don't know what that does to you, but I know in that moment, I think Jacob just went, oh my goodness, what do I do? I can't go back there to Laban, and here's what's facing me is an angry older brother with 400 men, I'm sure well armed. This is that crisis moment. And so he's on the bank of this river. He sends his family across. He comes up with this scheme, because that's what we do, right? When we're trapped, we go into, what's the strategy to fix this? And he's doing all this, and he sends them off, and he's scared to death, and says he takes a nap. And here's what's interesting. And this is the story I want to get to. It's found in Genesis 32. Is that in this moment, he's taking a nap, and he wakes up, and there's a stranger there. Let me read it to you. Verses 9 of chapter 32. It says, and Jacob said, again, he prays, O God of my father Abraham, and God of my father Isaac. Remember that? The Lord who said to me, return to the country of your kindred, and I'll be with you. It'll be good. He says, I'm not worthy of the least of all the deeds of steadfast love and all the faithfulness that you have shown to your servant. For with only my staff I crossed this Jordan, and now I have become two camps. Please deliver me from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I fear him. And that he may come back and attack me, and the mothers with their children. But you said, I will surely do you good and make your offspring into the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered for multitude. Notice this prayer. He's kind of like, again, hey, God of my granddad, God of my dad, I need your help here. And so then he takes this nap, and then in this nap, the stranger shows up, and he begins to wrestle with him. Again, jumping down to 32, verse 24, it says, and Jacob was left alone, and the man wrestled with him until the breaking of the day. When the man saw that he did not prevail against Jacob, he touched his hip socket, and Jacob's hip was put out of joint as he wrestled with him. And then he said, let me go, for the day has broken. But Jacob said, I will not let you go unless you bless me. And he said to him, what is your name? And he said, Jacob. And then he said, your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel. For you have striven with God and with men and have prevailed. Then Jacob asked him, please tell me your name. And he said, why is it that you ask me my name? And there he blessed him. See, this is such a powerful story, and this is where I want to go with this. All of us have an origin story. Yours, mine, they're all unique. They're all unique to us. And I'm confident every one of us has components to that have really caused us pain. And as guys, what we so often do is we start to go, how do I solve my own problems? How do I control my destiny? And what happens is we start to get to these places where we're faced with real dilemmas, real challenges. And similarly, I think what we do, especially if we were raised in a Christian home, but maybe not, I think in our desperation, we kind of cry out for help as we're trying to solve our own problem. That's what Jacob's doing. But in this moment, it's really unique because it says that God showed up, a stranger, but we know it's God. It's reference to that. God shows up, and it's that Jacob wrestles with God. Now, I don't know what you think about this, but I think it's really powerful that this point is, I don't know if you've ever had this experience where you're stressed about something and you're sleeping at night and you're discontent in your spirit. And it's like God is showing up in those moments to wrestle with us, to go, hey, what are you going to do here? And the decision that he was faced with, that we're faced with is, do you trust me? Do you trust me? Can you trust me? Are you going to let me help you through this? Jacob wrestles with God. And Jacob's a baller, right? He goes all night with him. God gets to the point where, like, you know what? I got things to do, a universe to run, touches his hip, whatever it is. But my point is this, is Jacob is forever marked by this wrestling match. And then two things come out of it. Is one, he has a limp, a reminder of his wrestling with God. But the other thing that changed is this, is that from that moment forward, God became no longer just my granddad's God and my dad's God. It became his God. In fact, there's this passage. It's in Genesis 33:20 where it says, after the night's over and he's heading back out and he crosses the river, he's heading up, and it says this, there he erected an altar and called it El Elohe Israel, which means God, the God of Israel. What's his name? It's Israel. You see, after wrestling with God, God became his God. My God. See, my point is this, is I think so often we get so afraid to wrestle with God, as if God can't handle our struggles. And what I learned from somebody named Jamie Winship a long time ago was this, is that true confession is really all about truth telling. It's about sharing what I'm struggling with, what I'm worried about. It's also confessing our sin, but sometimes it's even confessing, God, are you going to show up? Because I don't know. And when we wrestle with God, what we end up doing is actually drawing closer to him. And it marks us. It changes us. And so here's my questions to you guys as we kind of finish this up. I want to invite you to consider some questions. How do you respond when things get difficult? Do you actually show up and wrestle with God on these things and allow God to lead you? Allow God to be more and more your God? Or do you try to take it on your own and miss the opportunity for God to show up, even as we wrestle with him, and to mark us with a completely different faith? That's what an everyday person does, is recognize that an everyday God is showing up in our everyday struggles. And what he wants you to do is, let's work on this together. Let's wrestle with this. And let's see what comes out of this for not only your good, but the good of those who depend on you. It all worked out. God showed up. But forever now, this is the God of Israel. And I think this is the God that wants to be yours as well. Let me pray. Father, thanks for this time. Thanks for these men. Thanks for an opportunity to lean in. And Lord, I do pray that even in our pride, we would not miss the opportunities to wrestle with you towards the good that you want for us and the good that you want for those that we have influence over. And so lead us in that now as we discuss. In Jesus' name, amen.